Hey, this is Quentin Collins. I'm the author of The Dandelion Speaks of Survival, forthcoming from Cherry Castle Publishing in 2021. Uh, this is my one of my few trips out in the world these days with the pandemic going on. And one of the crazy things about driving around my neighborhood is seeing some similarities to kind of the places I grew up. In the Boston area where I'm at is one of the few spots I've seen where the streets aren't like ridiculously narrow, which is something is so strange going back home to the Chicago suburbs because the streets are ridiculously wide. Like you can see for miles and miles, it feels like in every direction because of how wide the streets are. And it got me thinking about how one of the great things about writing and my journey to becoming a better writer throughout the years was really discovering the language of home and what it meant to talk in a voice that was my own. Some of the earliest feedback I got in my grad school, days was, trying to figure out how to get to fresher language and, talking imagery that was something that my mentors hadn't seen before. We're all working with the same words, but it's how we make them unique to us and the voice that we have. Whether that's a voice we're establishing for speaking from our own perspective as, the speaker in the poem, or for writing in a persona. And one of the things I had come to discover on my way to writing this book was that I really had to stop and think about, what are the languages of where I'm from? What are the colloquialisms? What are the names of the streets? What are the things I can name? What kind of cars are people driving? What were the locations where I spent a lot of time? Because, the first part of this book is very autobiographical. And I had to stop and think about that. What are some of the ways that I can talk about where I'm from in these poems if I'm not necessarily talking about, a where I'm from poem? And some of that comes through in the second half of the book, too. I think one of the biggest things about it is I had to really stop and, ask myself, what are the images that I or anyone from my area would use? And one of them is, really big for me at the end of the poem, Angry While Black, which appeared in Up the Staircase Quarterly not too long ago. I have a tornado at the end of the poem. And when I came to that image, I was thinking, a lot about how do I want to end this sonnet? What's really going to come to the fore at the end of this, poem? And when I was thinking in terms of, what image do I want to end with, I was like, man, like there's a lot of stuff I can think of in terms of like what conveys this sense of rage I'm feeling when I'm speaking back against, issues of oppression and racism right now. And I was like, well, how do I embody that in something that's of my area and of my home? And one of those things was definitely thinking about, you know, okay, what's weather like in the Chicago area? And for a lot of folks, we think about wind and all that, but specifically, where I grew up in the Chicago area was very prone to tornadoes at certain points. I remember being a kid and actually getting to see one when the alarms were going off and everything, and I'm thinking like, yeah, like that was the point where I really had come to understand the nature of, what energy the world can put back at us. And so that was how I wanted to end the poem. I was like, this is an image of my home and of my world and my space and what I'm used to and what's accustomed and authentic to my voice. So I try to make sure I do that with every poem, even when I'm speaking from a POV that's a little more collective and communal. I'm thinking about, what's the language of the world that I know and where I'm at. And I think that's the piece where we talk about write what you know. It's not necessarily, saying you can't write about certain things, um, but sometimes it's about how do you write it from your perspective, the POV that you own. And one of the ways you can definitely do that through craft is, think about your language and think about what images are ones that are from the places that you've been, you've lived, and you've experienced, and how do you bring those to the fore. And if you can do that, you can establish some of that uniqueness and authenticity to your voice that nobody else is going to have. Because again, we're all working with the same words, but it's the way that you put them together for your voice that makes the poem. Well, thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to get all the newest updates, all the newest videos. Also, get all the news from when the book is coming out. I promise it'll be dope. You'll have the greatest time ever reading it. So get your bookshelf ready. And again, thanks for listening.